Wow, okay. The stuff you sent over about Indian students facing deportation from Canada, it's wild. We've got articles and even a YouTube video transcript, so this should be quite the deep dive. Sounds like a lot of these students were victims of a pretty elaborate scam involving fake acceptance letters to get into Canadian colleges.
Yeah, and it's interesting here that we're not just talking about a few isolated cases. This situation potentially affects thousands of students, primarily from the Indian states of Gujarat and Punjab.
Yeah, that's what really caught my eye too. The sheer scale of it is just mind-blowing. Can you imagine having your dreams of studying abroad just completely shattered just because someone handed you a bogus piece of paper? And not just that, the financial hit these families are taking is massive. The sources mention around $30,000 per student.
Yeah, and that $30,000 isn't just a number. That often represents a huge portion of a family's savings. Sometimes it even requires them to take out loans. The financial strain, coupled with the emotional turmoil of seeing their children's aspirations just crumble, it's got to be devastating.
Absolutely. You're putting your trust, your future, in these agencies and consultants who promise you the moon and then deliver a fake acceptance letter. I can't even imagine the sense of betrayal.
It's a massive breach of trust. And it really underscores the vulnerability of these students who are often navigating a complex system in a foreign country. And, when you look at how this scheme worked, it's actually quite calculated. These unscrupulous agencies in India essentially created this pipeline of fake documentation, feeding the demand for Canadian student visas.
So it was a whole system designed to deceive. It's almost unbelievable that it went undetected for so long.
Right. And one of the things that allowed this to happen was a lack of consistent and thorough verification processes. Apparently, Canadian authorities have been relying heavily on the IRCC, that's the Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, to vet these student applications. But the sheer volume of applications seems to have overwhelmed their capacity to really scrutinize every single document.
But they're catching on now, right? The sources mentioned that in 2024 alone, over 10,000 potentially fake acceptance letters were flagged. That's a 30% increase from the previous year.
Yeah, it seems like they're playing catch-up, but they are taking action. They're starting to implement more sophisticated document analysis techniques, looking for inconsistencies and signs of forgery. They're also reaching out directly to educational institutions to verify the authenticity of these acceptance letters.
So it's not like they're just throwing up their hands and saying, oh, well, too bad. They are trying to sort through this mess.
Yes, and they're facing a really tricky situation. They need to figure out who genuinely fell victim to this scam and who might have knowingly participated in it.
It's kind of a legal and ethical puzzle, isn't it? You want to be fair to those who were misled, but you also need to uphold the integrity of the immigration system.
Exactly. And all of this is happening against the backdrop of already strained diplomatic relations between Canada and India. This case has the potential to further complicate those relations.
Okay, so we've got this human tragedy unfolding, potential diplomatic nightmares brewing, and a system struggling to catch up. What a mess. What does this even mean for students who want to study abroad legitimately? Is the dream dead?
Well, I don't think the dream is dead, but this situation certainly serves as a stark warning. It highlights the importance of doing your homework. Before you even think about handing over any money or documents, thoroughly vet any agency or consultant you're considering working with. Look for red flags like guarantees that sound too good to be true.
It's really about being your own advocate.
Exactly. Don't just take someone's word for it. Go directly to the source, the college or university itself, and confirm that your acceptance letter is legitimate. This situation underscores that even seemingly trustworthy systems can be manipulated.
So what does all this mean for Canada as a destination for international students?
Well, this scandal has the potential to tarnish Canada's reputation as a welcoming and trustworthy place to study.
And that damage could have ripple effects for years to come.
Absolutely. It could impact future enrollment numbers, discourage investment in international education programs, and even affect Canada's overall economic growth.
Okay, so we've laid out the situation. A massive scam, heartbreaking consequences, diplomatic tensions, and a whole lot of questions. Where do we even go from here?
That's a great question, and it leads us to the bigger picture. What lessons can we learn from this whole ordeal? How can we prevent this from happening again? And what does this say about the future of international education as a whole? We'll dig into those aspects after a short break. Yeah, this situation, it's really exposed the cracks in the system, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And it raises a ton of questions about how to fix things, not just for the students affected right now, but for everyone involved in international education.
Right. And one of the biggest questions is, how does Canada move forward from this? Their response so far has been pretty reactive, a lot of scrambling to identify fake documents and figure out who to deport.
Yeah, it sounds like they're trying to strike a balance though, right? On one hand, they have to uphold the law and protect their borders. But on the other hand, you have these students who were clearly misled, and deporting them just feels incredibly harsh.
Yeah, it's a real dilemma. And the YouTube video transcript we have really highlights the human costs of these deportations. Imagine being uprooted from your studies, sent back to a country where you might face stigma and shame, not to mention the crushing debt.
Not to mention the psychological impact. You've invested years of your life and your family's resources into this dream, only to have it snatched away. That's got to be traumatic.
Yeah, it raises questions about whether deportation is truly the best course of action in every case. Maybe there's room for more nuanced solutions, like offering amnesty to those who can prove they were genuinely deceived, or creating pathways for them to reapply with legitimate documents.
It's a complicated situation for sure. But let's talk about those concrete actions Canada is taking. You mentioned earlier that they're stepping up their document verification processes. What exactly does that look like?
Well, they're taking a multi-pronged approach. They've significantly increased the number of staff dedicated to reviewing study permit applications. And instead of just glancing at acceptance letters, they're now taking a much closer look. They're scrutinizing things like font styles, logos, signatures, anything that might signal a fake.
So basically becoming experts in forgery detection.
Exactly. And they're also using sophisticated software to cross-reference information, comparing data from the acceptance letter with records from the educational institution itself. This helps them flag inconsistencies that might have been missed in the past.
Yeah, it sounds like they're trying to close those loopholes that allowed this scam to flourish.
They are. And they're also taking steps to prevent future fraud by increasing collaboration with educational institutions. They're establishing direct communication channels so colleges and universities can easily flag suspicious applications or verify the authenticity of documents.
Makes sense. Get the schools involved from the get-go.
Right. And they're also cracking down on the source of the problem by working with Indian authorities to investigate and shut down those fraudulent agencies. It's a big task, but they're sharing intelligence and coordinating efforts to dismantle these criminal networks.
That's crucial. It's like playing whack-a-mole. If you only focus on catching the students with fake documents, you need to go after the people producing them in the first place.
Precisely. And beyond law enforcement, they're also looking at ways to tighten up the visa application process itself. This could involve stricter requirements for education agents and consultants, making sure they're properly accredited and vetted.
So holding those intermediaries accountable.
Yes, and they're also considering increasing the scrutiny of financial documents, making sure applicants can genuinely afford to study in Canada. The goal is to make it much harder for fraudulent applications to slip through the cracks.
All of these efforts are important, but I keep coming back to this question of Canada's image. This whole situation has got to be a public relations nightmare for them.
It definitely has the potential to damage their reputation. Canada has long prided itself on being a welcoming and multicultural society, and this incident calls that into question. It also raises concerns about the integrity of their immigration system and their ability to protect international students.
And that could have long-term consequences for their economy, right? International students contribute billions of dollars annually.
Absolutely. If Canada gets a reputation as a risky or unreliable destination for international students, it could lead to a decline in enrollment and a loss of revenue. Universities might struggle to attract top talent, and businesses might face difficulties recruiting skilled workers from overseas.
Okay, so we've talked about Canada's response and the potential impact on their image. But what about the bigger picture? What are the wider implications of this scandal for international education globally?
Well, this situation, it serves as a wake-up call, highlighting the need for greater transparency and accountability across the entire international education sector.
So it's not just a Canadian problem.
Not at all. We're seeing similar challenges play out in other countries that host large numbers of international students. There's a growing recognition that the current system, with its reliance on paper documents and often opaque processes, is ripe for exploitation.
So what needs to change?
Well, for starters, we need to move towards a more digital and secure system for verifying educational credentials. Think about things like blockchain technology, which can create tamper-proof records that are easily verifiable by institutions and governments worldwide.
Yeah, that would make it much harder to forge documents or misrepresent qualifications.
Exactly. And it would also streamline the application process, making it easier for legitimate students to navigate the system.
I'm starting to see how this scandal could actually be a catalyst for positive change.
It could be. It's forcing everyone to re-examine how we do things and think about solutions that benefit both students and institutions.
We've covered a lot of ground, but I keep thinking back to those students who are facing deportation. They're at the heart of this story, and their fate hangs in the balance. How is Canada going to navigate this incredibly complex situation?
That's a question with no easy answers. It's a moral and ethical minefield with no clear-cut solutions that will satisfy everyone. Canada is under immense pressure to find a way forward that upholds the law while also demonstrating compassion and a commitment to justice.
It's a tough spot to be in, for sure. But before we get too deep into those questions, let's shift gears for a moment. What are the implications of this situation for someone like you listening to this right now? Why should someone who's not directly affected by this scandal care?
That's an important point, and one we'll explore in more detail right now.
We've been talking about this fake acceptance letter scandal and how it's impacted international students, Canada's reputation, and even diplomatic relations. But yeah, you're right. It's easy to feel disconnected from these sorts of stories if you're not directly involved.
Exactly. And yet this situation actually reveals a lot about the world we live in. A world where information spreads at lightning speed. And it's not always easy to separate fact from fiction.
So even though most of us aren't applying for Canadian study visas, there's still a takeaway here.
Absolutely. Think about it this way. The same tactics used to deceive these students are used in countless other scams and misinformation campaigns. We're bombarded with information from all sides, whether it's on social media, through email, or even from seemingly reputable news sources.
Yeah, it's like you can't trust anything anymore.
Well, it's not about being completely distrustful. It's about being a critical consumer of information. Always ask yourself, who's sharing this information? What's their agenda? What evidence are they providing? And most importantly, does it sound too good to be true?
So it's about developing a healthy dose of skepticism.
Exactly. And it's about being proactive. If something sounds fishy, don't just accept it at face value. Do your own research, verify the source, and look for independent confirmation.
It's easy to get caught up in the excitement, especially when it comes to something like a dream opportunity to study abroad. You might want to believe it so badly that you overlook the red flags.
That's right. And that's why it's so important to have those critical thinking skills in place. It's about protecting yourself not just from scams, but from all kinds of misinformation and manipulation that are out there.
This whole situation with those fake acceptance letters also raises questions about the role technology plays in all of this. I mean, technology enabled the scam in the first place, right? But could it also be part of the solution?
That's a great point, and it's something that's being explored more and more. Think about blockchain technology, which we mentioned earlier. It has the potential to create secure and transparent systems for verifying educational credentials, making it much harder to forge documents or misrepresent qualifications.
So kind of like a digital fingerprint for your educational background that can't be faked?
Exactly. And AI and machine learning could be used to analyze vast amounts of data, identifying patterns and anomalies that might indicate fraudulent activity. This could help streamline the vetting process, making it more efficient and less susceptible to human error.
It sounds like we're on the cusp of some pretty major changes in how international education is managed.
I think so. This scandal, while unfortunate, could be a catalyst for innovation and reform. It's forcing institutions and governments to rethink their approaches to embrace new technologies and to prioritize transparency and security.
And hopefully that will lead to a system that's more equitable and less vulnerable to exploitation.
That's the goal. And it's a goal that requires collaboration from all stakeholders, students, institutions, governments, and technology providers.
It's been quite a deep dive, hasn't it? From the personal stories of students facing deportation to the complexities of international relations and the potential of technology to reshape the future of education.
We've covered a lot of ground, and it's clear that this issue is far from resolved. But I think the most important takeaway for our listeners is this: be informed, be critical, be proactive.
Don't just blindly accept what you're told, whether it's about a dream opportunity or a breaking news story. Do your own research, verify your sources, and trust your instincts.
And if you see something that seems off, don't be afraid to speak up. Ask questions, challenge assumptions, and demand accountability. We all have a role to play in creating a world where information is trustworthy and systems are designed to protect, not exploit.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on this issue. What are your takeaways? What solutions do you envision? Share your insights with us on social media. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.